Alrighty, so we are at mini whole cloth number 2. I've advanced my quilt top up. I've stitched down the sides to baste it all down and together. And I want to show you guys a little trick. So I use my red snappers as my side clamps, right? Because I love the nice, even, consistent tension that they give me all the way across, instead of one clamp just pinching somewhere and giving me a weird tension areas, peaks and valleys, if you will. I have something nice and consistent along the whole quilt top. Now, this ruler base that you see, as I mentioned in the first video, in case you're watching this one first to do the easier one, it hits this plastic clamp, and then again it pulls on this clamp. You could see it. It's pulling it out because they're so low and so heavy, putting weight on the side of the quilt. I eliminate that by putting a rod, dowel rod, piece of wood, whatever, on the side. Now look for a minute here. My red snappers are also heavier. If you have zippers, they're heavier. If it's not just your canvas leader, what are the other ones? You have red snappers, you have zippers. I love how words are completely leaving my brain today. You also have are they leader grips? The blue ones. They're just like the red snappers, same thing. They're all heavy, they put weight. So it hits this portion here. When you are quilting, your ruler base will hit it. I don't know if you can see it go down and come up. So what I like to do is take that rod, okay, and I put it under the leader grip, and I just put it on there until the rod rests on my bar. So it's sitting on my bar. So what that's doing is that's holding the weight of the leader grip up so that in the very middle there's barely any hit, okay? If that ruler base hits this red leader grip in any way, it causes bumps and resistance like you saw in the last quilt along. So without further ado, let's get this bad boy started. I have changed to a metallic thread, and that one is also, I found a stack wound spool, so I didn't have to thread my whole machine for a cone, which is a plus for me. And we are going to do this design. And again, if you're using a contrasting thread, you're going to see every lump and bump. If you are using a thread that blends, you won't see as many mistakes or inclusions, as I like to call them, when you're quilting. It's like a diamond. You're including all of the flaws as a part of the artistic element. All right, so the first thing that we want to do is we want to stitch the perimeter, secure all that down. One of my goals in doing this is usually to give you the best thread path possible in completing a project. This way you don't have to backtrack a million times to get a design concept going. Now this is the first time I've used this wonderful Wonderfill metallic thread. First thing I can say is that I'm using a 4.5 needle with it, which is a bigger needle. It's probably like, what, a 119, 120. Or not 119, 120. Yeah, so I was close. I had it backwards. It's a 120-19. It's a 4.5 Grosbecker needle. So it's a wider eye needle that's going to help my metallic have time to get in and out of the fabric sandwich, the quilt sandwich. It allows it more time so there's less chance of shredding. I'm using a 60 weight Magnaglide bobbin pre-wound. And what else? So my materials for the project, for this one and the other small whole cloth, are Moto Grunge top and backing fabric and a Quilter's Dream wool batting. I would recommend, if you're actually using these as placemats, maybe use a Quilter's Dream cotton or 80-20 blend. So we want to have the most efficient thread path as possible to eliminate backtracking, causing thread paths to be too thick, and potentially causing breakage if you're going over the same place like 7 different times. So this, like with any other quilt block, if we're pretending this is just one big intricate quilt block, we're gonna do the outside stitch in the ditch first, and then we're gonna work our way to the inside. I may have to switch from the metallic at some point if it's giving me trouble. So far it's not, but I see a couple little blurbs where one little loop of thread is kind of popping up here and there. I could have lint in my bobbin housing, might need to clean that, or it could just be because the specialty threads are a little finicky. If I have lint in my bobbin, it would be because of my fabric and batting, and not because of my thread, because I've been using basically plastic and rayon. Keep in mind this line that we're stitching now is probably going to be hidden in our binding, so it doesn't matter if you backtrack on it a bunch of times or not. You'll notice I could not care less about stitching right on top of a previous line when it comes to being on the outside edge where the binding's going to be, largely because that'll push down the binding on the batting on the sides, which will allow my binding to fold over it more flat. So I kind of will create extra lines all along the outside when I'm traveling, and you'll see that as I stitch, so do not be alarmed. So basically, you have a bunch of now vertical back and forth lines that you've been creating on this quilt top. And what we're gonna do is we are going to go through and we're going to stitch all of those blue lines first. All right, now this one doesn't connect to my next one. So like I said, I'm gonna come out, do a little bit of a wiggly thing until I get to my next one. And all I'm doing is preparing that outer edge to accept my binding. And it only needs to be 1/4 of an inch to 1/2 inch wide in there. And that's just something that I do kind of as a habit to keep everything nice and flat. If I don't do that with a wool batting, you can see on the edge, I can just slide my fingers right under there without even having to really lift it. It's just so big and poofy and in your way. You need to use a serger or a zigzag stitch all the way around the end to do it. So you might as well utilize your traveling time to help you do that. Okay, so we stitched our 2 blue lines. Now, remember what I said when we stitch our echo lines, our dividing lines, because you have your main line and your dividing line that gives you a little channel in between each design to kind of give your eye a break. We're going to utilize our ruler for that. Now, if you've done the other free motion quilts along with the other little mini quilts, you will know how to use the lines in your ruler, but if you've done this one first, I want you to pay attention. So you see all of these little lines? They're all 1/4 of an inch. And your needle away from your ruler, the space from your needle away from your ruler, you can see right here, is 1/4 of an inch. So wherever you want your needle to be, you got to put your ruler about 1/4 of an inch to either side of it when you're stitching. So we're going to come over. I'm going to line up my ruler with this side blue line, and I'm going to stitch until the back part of my hopping foot gets right even with this line, because that means that my needle will be 1/4 of an inch past that line. If you're not sure, you put your ruler on the blue line. You stop when your foot hits the next blue line. And the reason why you're using this foot as your gauge is because your needle is 1/4 of an inch away from the outside of that foot. So it's helping you to keep even, consistent spacing. You also could have, during the planning portion of this, drawn your 1/4 inch line and then stitched it down. However, every time you stitch, it pulls the fabric just a little bit. So the space from here to your next line, sure, it should probably stay the same, but I like to just use my ruler. And then the rule is, if we're gonna stitch them all on the outside to the right, we're gonna do that with every single block. So stitch until you get to that block, come up until your hopping foot is even with the blue line. I've gone a little too far. Using a contrasting thread. Too bad, so sad, that's your new line. Stitch until your foot is past the next blue line. Just even with it, not past it. Okay, then we're gonna zigzag it up to the next one. So now we're following our next blue line, and then we'll do another echo. So we're going on that blue air and water soluble line. I don't like to stitch any of my fills until my dividing lines are stitched. This way I know that my area is stabilized and divided up properly. Went a little too far on that one. So what I want to point out, look at how tiny this space is. Right here, it fits my finger. It's a little less than, 3/4 of an inch. This is what I was saying, if you come down with your echo lines and you cut into that, you would have less than 1/2 of an inch to get your design in there. And that's no bueno. So that's why we're always gonna put our echo lines to one side so we can keep our spacing consistent. I know that this is a little more free-flowy. It really is a lot different than the structured one that we just did. But I think you can agree that it kind of helps to see quilting both styles, just to kind of open your brain to the different options, and also to understand that quilting is a free-form art. It is what you make it. You don't have to be caught up by all these rules and regulations that have you doing things any particular way, because there just aren't rules anymore. It's not like a thing. There are techniques that allow you to get things done with greater ease, but you don't have to worry about rules. Okay, so we've done our echo line. Now we're doing our blue planned line. If your machine has a hard time getting tight corners, you can just stop, get an extra stitch in there, and that'll give you a nice pointy corner. You notice I stop with my needle down, I position my ruler, and I keep stitching. Okay, so we've done our blue water-soluble line, and now we have to do the echo line. And if I put my ruler up next to the foot and it's not quite in line with my blue stitch line, I use that ruler to creep my hopping foot forward until I get to where I need to be. I really love this method of quilting, and I plan on doing more with it in the future as I practice and kind of find my own style with it. Because you can see we're doing everything in one pass, which I always love. We finished our echo line. We gotta go find our next blue line. This is where it starts. And then our last echo line. You'll notice I'm using every single side of my hopping foot. I like to, not everybody likes to. That's okay. There's no right or wrong way. You can work from the back or work from the front. It's completely up to you. If I wanted, well, that's irrelevant now. Let's say if I wanted to follow this line from the front, I'd just line up my ruler, but I have to. Okay, so now I'm going to stitch around because I like to work left to right. It makes sense for my ruler hand. But I also want to kind of tack down this area that's all wool. And you can kind of get a feel for what my grid looks like. I'm going to start in my bottom left corner. We're going to do a mixture of concentric circles and straight lines. And before, concentric, straight, concentric, straight, concentric. Before, on my last placemat, I had where it started with the straight lines basically, and it ended with the straight lines, but this is going to start with one and end with the other. So what I would do at this point, I'm actually going to take my thread out. I cannot believe that didn't break. This thread's a lot stronger than I give it credit for. It's pretty good metallic. I have not been able to stitch this much with metallic. This is definitely something that I will be ordering for my vendor shows coming up here in the near future, and to get them on my website, boldnotionquilting.com. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a look at this. And you remember that one area that was really small? This is an area you would much rather do lines through. So this is going to be lines. This one's nice and open, pretty good for the swirls. This one's going to be lines, a little skinnier, and then this one's pretty open for the swirls. So that's pretty good. So if I know that I'm not going to like start and end with the same design, I'll take a look at my plan and say, okay, what areas might not be good for my little circles to go in? And then that will really help me decide which order they should go in. So I'm going to do the concentric circles. which I totally love. If you don't love them or you don't feel confident with them, but you want to do this project this weekend, you could fill it with any other moderate quilting design. So it's not going to be so dense that it's flat as a pancake. You want to see some kind of loft and dimension in your quilting. But you could do even just a stipple in there and just make sure that it's consistent and that it's not too tight. So for the concentric circle, I actually don't need my ruler anymore. I'm terribly OCD and have to put things away when I'm done with them. I can't have clutter. It hurts my brain. All right, so we're gonna start off with the concentric circle in these small cornerstone designs that we mapped out. And it's a great place to kind of get your feet wet. If you're not sure how you feel about the concentric circle design, you have all this space on the side. Let's get some playtime in there. Okay, we're gonna loosen it up. See how we feel about doing circles. If you're doing pebbles, you could do those in here. Okay. Now, let's see the key to the concentric circle design. Okay. So, you're going to come up, do a big old C curve, pull it back in, and you want to give yourself enough space to get out of there and kind of keep your lines consistent. Consistency in this design comes with practice, okay? Can't see anything I'm quilting. Sorry, that was in my way. So I would have come up and done this. Then you'll backtrack on that line you previously stitched until you get to a point where you feel comfortable that you can make another one. They don't have to be the same size. You want to try to aim for them to be the same shape so they look uniform. When you hit a line that you previously stitched, you backtrack on it, pull out another one. Touch the line, backtrack. Ooh, my thread's about to break. And then pull it on over. So my thread was shredding a little bit. My needle was actually getting a bit hot, okay? I saw this happening at the top. That's why I was like, oh, my thread's gonna break. So what I've done is I've gone through and I've dusted out my bobbin, checked my bobbin threading, and then I've checked the threading of my metallic. And you just want to check and see how easily it pulls. Now, I don't know if I had mentioned this already, but this stuff feels like waxy. It's so waxy. You can hear it. So it's really grippy, and you don't need a ton of tension on those discs to really make magic happen, because it puts in a lot of tension all on its own. Okay, and then I just want to say how much I love these pre-wound glide metallic magna bobbins, because I still have like a third of a bobbin left, and this is a tiny baby L size bobbin, but we'll see how much of this quilt top I can get through before my bobbin's gone. I thought for sure I would have lost the bobbin on the last quilt top, but I did not. So I'm going to keep warming up down here. And I don't care that I'm putting a million stitches in the same spot and it's all dark, because all of that's going to be in my binding. I don't care about that. I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to stitch in regulated mode. Do my C. Bring it out. Backtrack, touch my line, backtrack. Do another one. is that? It's all of a sudden shredding. I might need to get a new needle. If you have been stitching just fine, like we did all of this stuff just fine with the metallic thread and it's just now stitching, it could be because now we're changing direction. I saw this kind of blob of thread on here, and it's basically a portion of it coming unwound. These I'm not going to use for anything crazy, so it doesn't matter if not all of my threads are perfectly secured down. But I can hear a difference in my machine when I'm stitching, so I know something's wrong, and I can see this thread starting to shred. So I'm going to need to get rid of that. So I'm going to go ahead and change my needle and then get back to stitching. And look at that underneath. Yikes. My stitches look a little weird. When you don't feel comfortable that you can get out of a particular area, it's okay to just do an arch, backtrack, do an arch, backtrack, do an arch. The better that you backtrack, so if you need to go a little slower over those areas, the better it's going to look, because otherwise it'll look a little incomplete or like you're rushed. Okay, so we did our first little block of the concentric circles, and now we're going to do another one. If you notice, I don't care if I'm going past this line because this is where my binding's going to be. So if it means getting a better circle, then I'm always down for it. Alright, so I've switched out from the metallic thread. I don't want it to be shredding and dealing with that the entire time that I'm doing this. I still need to take some time to figure out how my machine likes to be threaded for the metallic thread. Not that it's not good, lots of quilters use it. I just haven't figured out how to use it on my machine. So I switched out to a darker thread, and now I'm going to work on some of the straight line quilting. Now this is where you can take this and really make it your own. I mean, aside from maybe doing a different design than the concentric circles, you could do vertical or horizontal lines. So we're gonna do horizontal or vertical, or you could do them all on a 45-degree angle. So because we're doing more of the concentric circle type design than we are the lines, I'm going to go ahead and just do one style of line. So you just start on one of those echoed lines that you made earlier. Actually, you know what? So it's a little more awkward. Let me just tell you why I'm choosing to do this. I'm not going to go to this next line over. This whole area is stabilized, so I'm not worried about it, because it's a lot harder for me to hold my ruler from the back and really see that my spacing's even. I would much prefer to work from the front forward. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do my next concentric circles to work my way down, and then I'll work my way up into those lines. So I'm going to skip over to here. Backtrack on our outer edge, come out, do another circle. Remember, we started the circle, but now we got this empty space right here. So we want to come out one more time to close it. If you ever run into a line, that's fine. Use your ruler, backtrack till you can finish that curve. And it'll look like your corner is just kind of sitting into it, which is a lot of fun. But you want to finish up this weird area first. I maybe would have normally had started in this smaller area first. I want them to look like they're overlapping, and right now it looks like I'm making a weird row, so I want to make one that isn't quite in the same area as everywhere else. And then the next one, we're going to put in this corner. Okay, so now I have 2 ways to get out of here. I can come out, go around, and come back down, or I can follow this line. I don't think I want to have a bunch of thick lines in my actual quilt top. So I'm going to follow this line out. Come over, follow this line in, and then I'll continue. Now I switch color threads, so that's a little different for me because now I'm creating a little extra bulk where it normally wouldn't be, but we don't want them to all look like they're in a line, so sometimes you gotta backtrack a lot more than you would normally want to kind of make the design look just right. Okay, so if you notice, this area is nice and big and this area will get you out, but because it gets so skinny in here and this is a little bit higher, if we move some of our circles in here to try to go that way and come back around, we're never going to get through this space. We're going to have a hard time. So I chose to finish my circle on the left. I'm going to move and work my designs over here to the left, fill them back into the right, fill this side, and come down through and finish to the end. So it's important that you pay attention to where you're going so that you know where you need to fill, so that you don't quilt yourself into a corner. And that is also one of those awesome skills that you just develop from lots and lots of practice. So the trick is just really to get to a spot where you feel comfortable that you can do another swirl. If things like this happen where you got these spaces that don't quite feel quilted, if you're somewhere where you can kind of ease in there, give yourself a little line and come out. To make that design look more finished, do it. If for some reason you don't feel as confident with what you can stitch, that's okay too. You just do what you can do, and the more you practice, the more you'll learn what you like and don't like about how to stitch these designs. A great way to avoid, which I don't know if you can see here, I'm just barely crossing my border lines, which you don't want to. You want that to be perfect so that these channels look empty. Is when you get close to them, you can put your ruler in front of it so that your machine can't go past that line. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna kind of marry the two. Stitch a line right in between them so it's less apparent. But you see how now that we have transitioned from stitching them right next to each other, they really look like they're nesting a lot better. Some of these spaces are a little weird and you're not sure if you're going to be able to fit a circle in there. Just echo whatever circle you want and then bring it out enough to where you can get another circle stitched in there. Now I don't know about you, but I like to kind of vary the size of my circles. I worry a lot about how consistent the spacing is between the lines if I'm doing more of a show type quilt. But this is, you know, just practice and just fun, so I'm not terribly worried about how evenly my machine is working. How evenly I'm working my machine, I guess you could say. And the bobbin thread ran out. It's about time. I don't know how many of you know this. This is what your bobbin core looks like if it's a Magna bobbin. But Glide has a recycling program, so you can actually send these cores back and they'll recycle them. If you weren't sure how to send them back to them, I think they need like something crazy, like 500 at a time. You could always send them to me and I can mail them back. I will include in the description my address if you ever want to pop these in an envelope and put a stamp on them. But I think it's kind of cool that the American-based Glide company recycles their plastic and magnetic bobbins. It's very neat. So we got a new bobbin snapped in. We're going to tack down those threads once again. I feel like I did that a lot for this little quilt. Largely because I was insistent on trying that metallic. All right, needle up. If I pull on either one, do they move? Ooh, that still moves just a little bit. Let's see. Needle up. Stuck. That's still moving. It's in there now. You want to give it that yank test. Make sure that it's locked in or those tacking stitches are going to come undone the first time you wash something. I'm going more than like 1/2 inch. Never hurts to use your ruler for support. And you get a few more lines in there. Call her done. All right. So now that we can go up our quilts, I'm gonna do 1/2 inch increments because it makes my heart happy to not have to do them so close together. So to get to 1/2 inch, you go to your 1/2 inch line on your ruler and or the first horizontal line etched on the inside of your ruler. Should be 1/4 inch away from the outside. You line that up with your outside border stitched line. And you stitch until you get down to your first echo line. Move your needle up until you can line up that first line again. And this is where glow line tape can really come in handy. Okay, and since we hit this line here, we just traveled up the edge, line up our first line. Let's go ahead and switch our glow line tape. As you can tell, you can use and reuse many times to that first line just to help you remember and give you a good visual guide for where you're going next. Okay. Sometimes you have to go around. Corners, which means you have to do a lot of traveling. And we're lining up that first line with this previously stitched line. So that it's 1/2 inch from here to here, which won't always make 1/2 inch from there to there. Now, one more cool thing about the ruler, I'm not sure if I pointed this out. There's 1/2 inch marks here. So it goes 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5, 3, 3.5. If you line this up with one of your, like I got it lined up on the number 4 right now, if I stitch up to where my needle is in the 1/2 inch mark, put it down, I can just go right over and use that to gauge my 1/2 inches. So, I love this ruler. It's called the Stunning Straight Edge. I still have some available on my website on Bold Notion Quilting if y'all wanted to give it a try. I like it for stand-up quilting. If you're using a long arm style type machine, even if you sit down but you run your machine like a long arm style, where you move the machine and not the fabric, I think it's great for that. I don't know if a ruler with a handle would be amazing for someone who is a sit-down quilter. All right, so our next section is more lines, but again, I don't like to do lines down. So I'm gonna skip to the concentric circles, do those, and then I'll come back up with my lines. So you might be wondering why I went all the way over in this corner and then came back out, and that's because I noticed that it's small enough that I might be able to get some circles in there, but I might not be able to make my way out. So that's why I went ahead and went back. Okay, so now all we have left are to do our last straight lines. I guess one note would be, if you don't want to have to move your ruler like I just did side to side, you probably want to make sure that none of the areas that you're designing are any longer than your long arm ruler. Again, keep in mind you can do these horizontal, vertical, 45-degree angle, 70-degree angle. That would have been fun. We should have did like a 75-degree angle. It's like a reverse 45. All right, we have completed our top. Again, if you're using coordinating fabric, you're not going to see all your little blips and bumps that happen. Don't worry too much about that. If you're using contrasting thread, you're going to see every little blip and bump, but that's good for your learning. So this is the whole little placemat. So that's fun. I mean, it's just a nice way to, we just took a 20 by 14 huge chunk of negative space. We cut it up, we gave it some dividing lines and 2 different designs, and we alternated them, and they just look amazing. Thank you so much for joining us for this free motion quilt along. I hope it was a nice, quick, and easy project that you learned a lot from. If you learned just one thing that will help you with your free motion quilting from here on out, then I have succeeded. I have reached my goal. Make sure that if you haven't already, you join our free motion quilt along group on Facebook. Show us your progress. Ask questions if you're stumped, if anything's stuck, and you're going to have a barrage of cheerleaders helping you out, so be prepared for that. We got some of the most wonderful quilters in the world on that page, and they're just so kind and so encouraging. It's a wonderful place to be. I look forward to seeing y'all in more classes on boldnotionquilting.com. Check out the training catalog. There are more classes coming this fall that are going to be a 4-part series that are going to take you from beginner quilting to custom quilting and everywhere in between, dealing with rulers, negative space, how to divide it up. So there's some great classes coming this fall, as well as in the spring, those Hoffman Dream Big, beautiful, digitally printed flower panels. We're going to do a free motion quilt along on that one as well. So thank you so much for joining me. I can't wait to see you all in class. Feel free to ask any questions or comments. I'm Lauren with Bold Notion Quilting. Please visit the webpage, boldnotionquilting.com, and check out all the cool stuff that we have to offer there. Thank you for joining us. Happy quilting.